How's it going, Rangers and overall hockey fans? Thank you guys so much for chiming in, either in the live stream or if you're watching on replay or listening wherever you get your podcasts. This is Rangers Review, episode 51 now. Very excited to get into this one. This was long overdue. We easily should have been doing this 2 days ago, but our schedules were not permitted. That we'll be getting into in a second. Steven and I, my name's Tower. You guys know me as Wardy probably, especially from Wardy NYM, covering Mets on YouTube. And of course, we got Steven Statboy Steven, the biggest stat boy that you will ever see, especially on Rangers Twitter. He's far above anyone else, to say the least. We're going to be breaking down, however, in our latest Rangers podcast, the past couple games for the Rangers, including their first game with their new acquisitions. That will be taking a good amount of time in today's pod to break down our initial reactions to those trades, acquiring Andrew Copp, Tyler Motte, and Justin Braun, how they fared in their first game for the Rangers at this point, and what we can expect not just from them, but for the Rangers and the games going forward. And we'll also be answering some questions if you guys are watching the live stream, where we do our normal Q&A segment towards the end of the podcast. But like I said, plenty to get into, very excited, long overdue. So again, for people that weren't aware, Steven was flying back home from the States to Dublin, Ireland, the day of the NHL trade deadline. So naturally, because of that reason, we would not be able to cover anything live as it happened. And the Rangers were pretty much silent until we got into that last hour where they did the bulk of their work. Not just they first acquired Justin Braun, as we know, but then they, of course, got themselves Andrew Copp, who I'm most excited about. I've said that already for at least the past month. I've been telling you guys how much I've liked Andrew Copp out of the options out there via trade. And of course, Tyler Motte, who was a very sneaky good pickup too. So we'll be deep diving them a little bit into the pod. But before that, we're going to go over the last 3 games for the Rangers up until we get to the Devils game. That's where we'll cut things off and talk about these player acquisitions. But yeah, we didn't get a chance to do it right away. And Steven was also getting his internet figured out yesterday. So we're a couple days late per usual. We do apologize. I know that it definitely has not been the most orthodox podcast at this point. But like I said, we're happy to be here now, and we're very excited to get into it. So Steven, how are you doing today, buddy?
Yeah, I take all the blame, of course, for traveling for 2 weeks. But yeah, it was a great trip. As much as I loved it, though, glad to be back in Dublin. Still jet lagged, I still sleep during the day and wake up or fall asleep at like 6 in the morning and then wake up at like 4. But I should be good to go next week. And yeah, I already watched my first Rangers game back in Dublin. I don't want to talk about that too much, but I guess we're gonna have to get into that later on. But yeah, all doing well. And yeah, planning my flight back on trade deadline day is probably the biggest mistake I've made since my first marriage.
I mean, look, we all make mistakes. This won't be the last time where we have something terribly timed with our respective schedules. It is what it is at the end of the day. Look, as much as it would have been nice to break the news as it happened, I'm glad that we can kind of garner our thoughts and actually react to least one game nice when they were in the lineup.
Yeah, it is nice that we had a couple of days to let it marinate, and now you get our opinions after we've seen them play for a game. We were able to, let it digest a little bit, the fact that we traded away all those picks and also Morgan Barron and Anthony Potato. So, yeah, excited to get into this one today. Let's go.
Yeah, no, let's go indeed. So, yeah, we're going to be going over the last, I would say, at least 3 games up until game 64 in the season. That's where we are going to stop. Like I said, talk about these acquisitions, because then we're going to get into that game against the Devils, that being the latest one. But Steven, our prediction going into this week, I think neither of us got the predictions correct, because out of those 3 games, Rangers went 2-1. I think I picked them going 1-1-1. If I'm not mistaken, I think you might have went 1-2 or something along those lines. So I don't know who won, who has the belt right now. And again, for people that aren't aware,
did you write down the goal predictions?
The goal predictions. Yeah. Did I write it down last time?
Yes.
Okay, let me check right now then. Give me 1 second. Yeah, if you guys aren't aware, what we do in the pod towards the end of each podcast, we look at the next upcoming schedule for the Rangers. We're looking at exactly how are they going to fare over, say, the next 3-4 games until we discuss again, because we do weekly pods usually. And then we give our predictions on the amount of wins and losses. And whoever gets it right, we act as if we have, like a belt, a championship that we win.
But if we're going to get one.
We are going to get one. But if neither of us get it right, then we pick, of course, a tiebreaker with who was close when it comes to the goals scored. So I'm just double checking quick. Give me 1 second, because, of course, I have everything messed around here. I want to say based on the Rangers' goals. Let me put it this way: did I have the over or the under? Because that's really going to dictate
You
things.
picked 12 goals, I think,
Okay, if I pick
and
12 goals, you
and
pick the under. I
I
remember
picked
you
the
picking
under.
the under. So let's just do the math quick. Rangers scored. Yeah. I mean, I picked
I
12.
mean,
Did I really pick 12 goals
yes.
over 3 games?
No, 4. We went with all 4 games for the prediction, I think, for the goal prediction.
Even the Devils game?
Yeah.
Okay, well, if we did, I was still wrong. So either way,
Yes.
you have the belt.
It
So
doesn't matter.
it
I
doesn't
still win.
matter. No, it doesn't matter. It's fine. We'll be more structured next time. But
Yeah.
before we go forward here in the pod, shout out so much to Kraylix in the live stream for the $20 donation. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Finally catching you live while the beginning. Skill beats grit. Oh, thank you so much for the donation. I appreciate that a lot. I can see where you stand in regards to, the Rangers being a gritty team versus skill. And you're absolutely right in a lot of ways. You can't just be gritty. You, of course, have to be skilled as well, if not more often than not. So again, appreciate that donation a lot in the live stream. But let's just dive in because the first game that we have for the Rangers, Steven, I'll let you take it away with that one if you'd like. That is against the New York Islanders. And this was a frustrating game. I will put it lightly. That was a very frustrating game that the Rangers should not have lost in that fashion. A blown call is what defined that game, Steven.
Yeah, we'll get into that when we get to the final goal. But what really stood out to me in this game was just how amazing this goalie battle is going to be for the next decade between the Rangers and Islanders.
Between two best friends, no less.
Yes, Shesterkin and Sorokin are best friends. They've played together at every age level for the national team. They played against each other at every age level for their club teams. They go way back, and for them both to end up in New York is just poetic. And unfortunately, Sorokin got the better of Shesterkin in this game, but it wasn't as if Shesterkin had a bad game. Sorokin made 29 saves on 30 shots. Shesterkin made 26 on 28 shots, but the quality of the saves, man, from both these goalies, it was amazing. If we look at the next generation of goaltending, and if there are any people listening with kids, or if there are any kids listening here who are playing goalie at a young age, keep an eye on these two, because these two are almost redefining how you play as a goaltender. We don't see guys like Lundqvist in these two, where Lundqvist is a very reactionary goalie. Sorokin and Shesterkin take away the high danger chances by coming out early and positioning themselves. And you could tell that Sorokin and Shesterkin were both on top of their game in this game. But unfortunately, the Islanders get the better of the Rangers in this game. Anders Lee gets them on the board 1 minute in to the second period on the power play, assisted by Barzal and Noah Dobson. Kreider ties it again on the power play, assisted by Jacob Trouba and Alexis Lafreniere. So that's Lafreniere's first ever power play point in the NHL. Up until this point, up until that day, all his points have come at even strength. And for Kreider, it was a milestone goal, 40th goal of the season. He becomes only the 5th Rangers draft pick to score 40 goals for the Blue Shirts in a single season. Big milestone for Kreider there. Going into the third period, tied 1-1. And then we get to the point you were alluded to earlier. Lindgren gets elbowed in the face by, who was it? Was it Wallstrom?
No, it was Palmieri, and he was the one that ended up scoring.
So he gets hit in the face with an elbow. Refs don't see it. Islanders go the other way, and Palmieri scores, assisted by Pollock and Pelech. Sam Rosen's nightmare, those two. And unfortunately, the Rangers fall short on St. Patrick's Day against the Islanders. It was, I think, the first time in 20 years they played the Islanders on St. Patrick's Day. Their record on St. Patrick's Day hasn't been great over the last few decades. But yeah, the Rangers deserve to win this. And I'm not one to complain about referees. Referees are human. Sometimes they miss things. Sometimes they make mistakes. This is a play that's not reviewable. And yeah, you could see that there was blood on Lindgren's face, but referees cannot call a penalty based on there being blood on someone's face, because that's just not how it works. It's unfortunate the Rangers fall victim to the referees missing that elbow to Lindgren's face, but yeah, they lose 2-1 to the Islanders. And I'm going to say one thing about the Islanders here. They are a playoff team in every way except their position in the standings. This is a team that if they didn't start 13 games on the road, followed by a wave of COVID cases, and then starting in a new arena where nobody felt at home, they would have been a playoff team. This team is just has an anomaly of a season. They're going to be back next year, so watch out for the Islanders, man. They are a good team. And like I said, if it wasn't for those 13 games on the road, how they started, it ruined them. And same thing happened to the Sharks a couple of years ago. The Rangers had it, I think, 10 years ago when they had to start like 9 or 10 games on the road with the Madison Square Garden renovations.
They ended up overcoming that, thankfully, that season.
The Rangers ended up overcoming it, but I think the Rangers only had like 7 or 8. And the Islanders had 13 games in a row.
Yeah.
And on top of that, and I think this is something that's underestimated as well, then they finally get home. They come home, but they come home to a new arena. No one's ever been in that arena. No one's ever been to that locker room. So it still feels like a road game. It still feels like a road game for them. And it did for a couple of games. I think they lost their first 4 or 5 games at the UBS Arena.
Yep. And the jinx was supposedly because one of the construction workers that was working on the rink dropped a Rangers jersey under the stadium as they were building, put some bad luck in there, and it held true for a while.
That's a great story. I don't know if it's true, but it's a great story.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it was from everything that I saw.
It wouldn't surprise me. But look, the Islanders are a good team. Losing to the Islanders 2-1. Nothing to be ashamed about, unless you look at the standings. But in context, this is a really good team we lost to.
Yeah. No, look, the Islanders, as you said, an anomaly of a season, wholeheartedly. And I will say, though, every single time that Igor and Sorokin match up, I am, jumping for joy. And what I loved about this game, outside of how it ended, because it was ridiculous, it was just a completely blown call that led to the Islanders winning. But prior to that, I loved the intensity. This felt like a playoff game for basically the entirety of the game until the Islanders really, of course, towards the end when they got that goal, that's when everything sucked the life out of them because there's only a couple minutes left. But yeah, no, this was a playoff game through and through. The fans were in it. There were back and forth between Islander and Ranger fans and MSG. And, goaltending wise, Igor stood on his head. He had a really good game. I'm not faulting this one on him at all. He had himself 26 saves out of 28 shots. And Sorokin, again, was just a little bit better. 29 saves on 30 shots. Won't go into the other advanced numbers because I realize they probably know that by now. So I know that takes up time. But in a nutshell, this was just a tough game for the Rangers to lose, in my opinion, especially with how the standings have been getting a little bit tighter as of late. But nothing too drastic. This was just a loss that, again, hurt more, not just because of St. Patty's Day and the Islanders, but just the fashion more than anything. To lose it after really you felt, and everyone can attest to it, a completely blown call is what caused this all to happen in the first place. But getting into the next game, and that we all know this one, this was an interesting one as well. Thankfully, a game that was in the Rangers' favor, and that was heading to Tampa. And when we looked at the schedule of the past week and Tampa and Carolina, there are good reasons to be concerned. And I told you, however, that I was far more concerned about the Carolina game than I was Tampa. And it's kind of funny because when you look back on it, the Rangers won both these games, but there's no denying that one game completely stood out more than the other when it comes to, not just offensive production, but just constantly actually having effort in the offensive zone. These were night and day differences. And of course, them being back-to-back definitely went in hand. But the Rangers go to Tampa, and they give up the early lead because Braden Point does what he does best. He scores his 23rd of the year power play goal, assisted by Killorn and Hedman, who are both having very strong years.
Also, controversial goal, by the way, by Point there.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yep. No pun intended. Pardon me. And the controversies felt like it was the case for the majority of these games, to be quite honest with you. But then when we get into the second period, thank you, Jacob Trouba. Gets his 10th of the season. Trouba has had such a sneaky good season, not just defensively, because we all know him for his defense and how much I feel that he has taken a step in the right direction this year, but offensively too has been gaining the points really from a guy that you don't necessarily expect it from just because the Rangers don't need it from him, right? Second power play, a guy that has Foxy in front of him, and in years prior, of course, had Tony D, and then prior to him, of course, we had Neil Pionk, and then we traded him for him. But still, just impressive to see Trouba hitting that 10-goal plateau. I was happy for him, and that made it a 1-1 game halfway through the second, assisted by Dryden Hunt, his 11th apple of the year, and Lafreniere, his 7th apple, which would be his 1 assist in multiple consecutive games for the Rangers. And then we get in the third period, and thank you, Mika Zibanejad, with literally 9 seconds left, was able to cause the Rangers to win this one on the power play. The Rangers were horrendous on the power play in this game. They were 1 for 6, but Artemi Panarin realizes the Rangers, of course, they get themselves a power play with the last 2 minutes of the game. If you're going to give up a power play to one of, if not the best power play team in the league with that amount of time, odds are that something good is going to happen for the Rangers, and thankfully that exactly did. The puck movement was tremendous. Panarin got a beautiful pass through the entire offensive zone horizontally to set up Zibanejad for that 1T that just sneaked through Andrei Vasilevsky to give the Rangers the win. His 25th of the year on the power play, in total 25 goals, assisted by Breadman, again, his 56th apple, and Fox with his 53rd assist as well. Just a very, very strong game for the Rangers that, again, special teams wise, they were not doing well whatsoever on the power play front, but thankfully there was a penalty by Tampa when it mattered most in the end, and that gave the Rangers a victory. So back-to-back games for the Rangers where we basically have a decider in the last couple minutes of the game, respectively, between the Islanders and now Tampa. So, Steven, what was your take on this one?
Well, you are missing one of the most vital points in how we won that game. When the Rangers got the power play late, they put out the first unit.
Oh, I know, the timeout.
And they put up the second unit, and then they got a quick whistle. And Zibanejad looked over to Gallant, and Gallant called a timeout. Put the first unit out there for the remaining, what was it, 30 seconds, something. Without that decision by Gallant, we don't score that game. We've been complaining about David Quinn.
What have we been saying basically every episode? How Gallant has been strategic about using his timeouts. And it felt like destiny as soon as Zibanejad looked at him too. Like you knew what was going to happen.
He doesn't always make the right decision. We'll get to that in the Devils game a little bit later.
That's separate, though.
But in this case, great move by Gallant. And this is the type of decision-making you want from your head coach. And this is what we've been complaining about under David Quinn for 3 years. David Quinn never made a decision that won us a game. On the contrary, actually, he made decisions that lost us games. But to see a coach make a decision that has this kind of impact, beating the two-time Stanley Cup champions, back-to-back Stanley Cup champions, in their own arena in the final 10 seconds of the game on the power play, man, that was huge. And this was a game that, in my opinion, was very sloppy from the Rangers. Their passes didn't connect. It just felt unorganized and messy. But they still get the win in the end. And then they move on to Carolina, and Carolina was the game where I really wanted to play Shesterkin. If you're going to ask me to play Shesterkin in one of these two back-to-back games, I would have picked the Carolina game.
Absolutely. Because we saw what happened last time Carolina and the Rangers matched up, right?
Not because of that, but I would always play my best goalie against division rivals because those are the teams you were competing with for seeding.
True. That's fair.
If you would have told me we go 1-1 over the weekend, which game do you want to win? I want to win the game against my division rival because that directly impacts our chances on getting home ice advantage in the playoffs.
Agreed.
But
what a game.
Gallant went with Georgiev, and the day before the trade deadline, there was a lot of talk about will this be Georgiev's final game as a Ranger? And going up against the Carolina Hurricanes team that absolutely dominated for 60 minutes. I'll say one thing. The Rangers passing, when they had possession, they didn't have much possession, but when they had possession, I feel the Rangers played in possession a better game than against Tampa. The problem is that they didn't have a lot of possession. Carolina Hurricanes got 44 shots on goal. Georgiev saved all of them for a shutout. And I want to quickly call this out. This is the most saves in a shutout win by a Rangers goalie ever.
Wow.
The only
That's
goalie who had
absurd.
more saves in a shutout was Henrik Lundqvist, who had 45 saves. I think it was in 2010. But that game was lost in a shootout.
That's crazy. I mean,
Yes.
look, when I looked at this game for Georgiev, especially, it was one of those things where it just felt fitting, especially in the scenario where the Rangers were going to trade him with all these rumblings. I'm like, if this is his send off, then by God, he couldn't have went out any higher than what he did. That
Yeah.
ended up not being the case, of course, but
Mm-hmm.
just what I mean, he went on his Henrik Lundqvist shit, to put it lightly. Hank
Yeah.
always dominated Carolina, even in the latter half of his career. And we saw Hank-esque type shutout here by Georgiev and
Yeah.
just a one-sided game, and it wasn't even
And,
close.
the shots, Martin Nechas and Jordan Stahl had 6 shots on goal each.
Yeah.
Sebastian Aho and Ethan Bear and Derek Stepan had 4 each. Seth Jarvis and Jesper Kotkaniemi had 3 each. So the shots came from the players that, as a Carolina Hurricanes fan, you want to get the shots. But Georgiev shut it down. He didn't allow any goals. And then late in the second period, Chris Kreider gets his 41st of the season, assisted by Jacob Trouba and Alexis Lafreniere. That's 3 games in a row with an assist for Lafreniere at that point. And then with the goalie pulled, Frank Vetrano, Frank the Tank, gets his first goal as a Ranger, assisted by Mika Zibanejad. And even though Chris Kreider didn't get an assist on this goal, I think Chris Kreider was instrumental to this. And you could tell by the celebration. Vetrano went over to Kreider, hugged him, and it was like a proud dad moment for Kreider. Did you notice that?
Something he's been a lot more accustomed to in recent years, right? It feels like
Chris
he's always looked
Kreider,
like that proud dad.
listen, this is not because he scored 40-plus goals this season. I've said this. You know this. I've said this for the last couple of years. Chris Kreider is the leader on this team.
Absolutely.
Chris Kreider is the guy that takes players into his home, that invites prospects to Connecticut over the summer to work out with him. He is the leader of this team. He's just not wearing a C, but he is a captain in every other way. He's in every way except wearing that letter on his jersey.
And it won't be long until he
is
is wearing that letter on that jersey. I don't think there's any denying
exactly. Look. I don't think there's any other player that makes sense at the moment. Do you want to go a 5th season without a captain?
No, I mean, there's just no point not to have one right now when you
Right.
clearly have everything that defines as a captain on your roster.
And I'm also look, I don't want 6 alternate captains.
Oh yeah, of course not.
How ridiculous is it that an original 6 franchise has more alternate captains than Stanley Cup wins? That's utterly ridiculous. It's ridiculous. 6 alternate captains, way too many. But yeah, Chris Kreider is the leader of this team. I will fight anyone on this. He is the leader of this team. He's the captain, de facto captain, without wearing the letter. The way Henrik Lundqvist was the real captain of the New York Rangers. Henrik Lundqvist was the real leader of the Rangers the last decade he was in New York. But yeah, a good win for the Rangers. Good result. It wasn't a good game. It wasn't pretty, but damn, 2-0 against the Carolina Hurricanes gets the Rangers their 40th win of the season.
My only gripe that I have with this game, and I think it's quite obvious, is that this just was the continued narrative of how the Rangers play against the Hurricanes more often than not. It's been like this for quite a bit now.
Well,
They're getting completely dominated.
The thing
Absolutely
is,
dominated.
we dominated the Hurricanes for 2 decades.
No. I'm not saying we didn't.
now-
But that doesn't mean shit. I'm focused on the now. I'm focused on this team. You know what I mean? I know the Rangers actually had the best record versus any other team in the Metro, that being Carolina, for a very long period of time. And then, of course, they parted with Jeff Skinner. And then when they started to do their retool, that's where everything started to change. But look, I admire the hell out of Carolina. I always say this. They are such a fun team. They're so balanced. They know exactly what they're doing. And just awfully similar to the Colorado Avalanche. Their game is just on such another level between the depth on their roster and the chemistry they have. It's so hard to match up. And they even got better. They even got better at the trade deadline.
if the Stanley Cup final turns out to be the Colorado Avalanche against the Carolina Hurricanes, I know this never happens because alternate jerseys, I think, are not allowed in the playoffs, but I would love to see both their reverse retro jerseys where we see the Quebec Nordiques logo against the Hartford Whalers logo in the
That'd be
Stanley
sick.
Cup final.
Yeah, it wouldn't happen, but that'd be
Just
sick.
just for one game. Give us that. Give the people that remember these two teams fondly for their amazing logos, for their history and impact to hockey as a sport. Give us that one game in the Stanley Cup Finals if it gets to that. Oh man, that will be awesome. But the Carolina Hurricanes are a really good team, and we managed to beat them in their own house. But yeah, like I said, it wasn't pretty. And Georgiev deserves every bit of credit he was given that day.
1000%. Again,
Yep.
we've, like normal, we've had our ups and downs with Georgiev all season long. He has not been at fault for every game in which it's been a defensive collapse for the Rangers. We've been fully aware of that. And he also has been at fault for games. But with saying that, this was easily not just his best start of the season, one of, if not his best of his entire career. Normally, when he stands out, he just has these anomaly of a game where he just again, he looks like Henrik reincarnated with the type of
I
thing
have
he's
to
doing.
say, though, when Shesterkin went out with injury against the Sharks back in early December, and Georgiev took over as the starter for a couple of weeks,
He was solid.
he was great. I think he had like a 935 save percentage in like a 10-game span. He single-handedly kept us in the playoffs, and he gets a lot of crap. He gets a lot of negative comments thrown at him for not being, openly happy when Shesterkin gets a win. Look, maybe he's just that type of person. Yeah, I don't know if there are issues in the locker room or if it's just him being a closed person. He's a Russian kid, with Bulgarian roots who grew up in Finland. This isn't a kid that that grew up in New York, or that from a very young age was always like the loudest player on the team. He's just not that type of person. Look, he played a really good game against Carolina Hurricanes, and we'll get into the deadline now. They didn't get any return for him, so he's going to be with us for the remainder of the season. Let's just support the guy when he's in net for us.
Yeah, no, I'm as long as he's a New York Ranger, I'm never going to not support him. Same with anyone, even if I don't love the player on the team. By God, if he's in the lineup, I'm rooting for him. Do I despise Patrick Nemeth at times? Yes, I do. But am I going to root for him while he's playing? Absolutely.
Listen,
I want him to thrive. Like he's a New York Ranger.
I criticize Patrick Nemeth more than anyone else, but I will never root for him to play a bad game.
Yeah, it's so stupid. That's rooting against your own team at the end of the day. Us fans have to bite the bullet. We have to deal with what we have to deal with. Whoever's out there is whoever's out there. All we can do as fans is, one, hope for the best and support them. And if they don't go right, then it just further proves our reasoning as to why we don't want them in the lineup or why we don't like them as a player. But it doesn't change the fact that we all should be supporting them as long as they're playing. Like,
exactly.
It's just silly to think otherwise. But let's get into the main reason why I know a lot of you guys are watching the episode. We're just under halfway through into the podcast, and this is what we're going to be talking a good amount on before we get into, of course, the game against the Devils. But the Rangers made a splash, and when we saw that first move was Justin Braun for, I believe it was it this year's was it this year's third round pick, or was it next
year's a third round pick in 2023? And I'm going to say this before we get into Braun, Motte, and Copp. I really loved what Drew did this trade deadline.
He did exactly what we wanted, Steven.
Exactly. We've been talking about this for months. What I wanted was to shore up the bottom six without giving up main assets. And he did exactly that. I didn't want us to give up a first-round pick, which we gave up a conditional first-round pick, which I'll explain later why I have no problem with it. But Braun for a third-round pick in 2023, see, the reason I love that move is because it's a 2023 third-round pick. It's next year's draft. A third-round pick is easy to recoup in the offseason. You can trade a player that's RFA. You can trade a depth player. Maybe you can even get a third-round pick for Patrick Nemeth. Who knows? But a third-round pick in next year's draft, I don't care about, because that's the type of pick that you can recoup in the offseason in multiple ways. But yeah, Justin Braun, experienced guy who played with Marc-Edouard Vlasic in San Jose for many years.
Yeah, his prime years were with the Sharks, and then he's been with
And
Philly the past 3.
there are people who say that when Braun left the Sharks, it coincided with Vlasic sort of regressing, and it's not out of the question that Braun was actually the main reason Vlasic was playing so well. Of course, Vlasic is a very talented defenseman, don't get me wrong, but it happens sometimes where, a really good defenseman loses his partner and he just turns into a different player. Braun was probably what Braun was to Vlasic what Lindgren is to Fox, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yep.
And
I think that's a good way of putting it.
To get an experienced defenseman for this defensive core, because let's be honest, I don't count the 2020 qualifying round as the playoffs. I know the NHL does, but I don't count it as playoff experience. Fox, Lindgren, Miller, Schneider, Lundqvist, Jones, 0 NHL playoff games. So what you're left with is Nemeth and Trouba. That's not enough. I understand why Drury went out and got Justin Braun, who played, I think, over 100 playoff games. I think he played the most playoff games over the last 5 or 6 seasons of any player in the league.
Really?
Because the Sharks were always in the playoffs. They were always in the hunt. They made the Stanley Cup final when, was it 2017?
2016, 2017, one of the two.
One of them was the Predators. The other one was the Sharks. I always forget because they were both beaten by the Penguins.
Yeah.
But they made it to the Stanley Cup final. The Sharks were actually the most successful team in that era to never win a cup. And the Rangers were in second place right behind them. They won the most playoff games by any team not winning a cup, not lifting the Stanley Cup. And Braun was an integral part to that team's defense. So, yeah, you get an experienced guy who's right-handed. And from what I've read, I haven't seen a lot of Justin Braun over the years, but from what I've read, he plays both sides. So there is an opportunity where he plays with Schneider, in which case I'll refer to that defensive pairing as the German pairing. But I think it's more likely that we see Nemeth and Braun in the playoffs because Gallant really wants experience on the blue line.
And that
we can argue about it because we both know that neither of us agree with it. But
And I think that Devils game speaks for itself. We're not in there yet. We're going to talk about it briefly, but we all know exactly how that game faltered and exactly what were some of the issues defensively.
This trade deadline, if I didn't know any better, I thought Jacob Trouba was making the calls.
I'm glad you said that. Let me take it from here, Steven. So most of you guys know this already, but Jacob Trouba basically has a connection with everyone that the Rangers have acquired, from Frank Vetrano that he's known going back, literally years, to Tyler Motte, Justin Braun, to I think a distant just because of the college they went to, and of course Andrew Copp. It's hilarious how they've all kind of been connected because they're all University of Michigan guys, I believe, and especially for Andrew Copp. He's been
Braun is actually University of Massachusetts, like
okay. So he's the one that is separate from the rest, but for the most
so
part,
you have Trouba, Motte, and Copp who went to Michigan, and then you have Braun, Jones, and Vetrano who went to UMass.
Oh, okay, I gotcha. But either way, I do know that of course we saw Vetrano's connection with Trouba. Trouba has his connection with Motte and Copp are really close, and Copp has been playing hockey with Trouba since he was 10 years of age. And he said that when, of course, Trouba got traded to Winnipeg, from Winnipeg, that was the first time in his career that he was without him. So it felt like weird. And Trouba credits himself for the reason why Copp is an NHLer, which I absolutely love. But it is kind of funny how they have those connections. There's nothing to really read into it, but chemistry-wise, it's definitely not a bad thing. And for the players that were available, and before we get it to Andrew Copp,
it's also not the first time the Rangers are doing this,
Yeah,
because
you're right.
Vetrano played with Adam Fox at the World Championships.
Yep.
Lindgren and Fox played together at the US NTDP, the National Team Development Program. They played together in World Juniors. They played together with Patrick Kodorenko, who was an undrafted free agent signing 2 years ago by the Rangers, who's now in Hartford with the Wolfpack. These connections, and maybe it's just that hockey is such a small world, but these connections are everywhere. And Copp, Motte, Vetrano, they all have a connection with Jacob Trouba, who is one of the leaders of this team. Yeah, I kind of like those moves already, but that added element definitely sticks out to me.
It sticks out because it just makes the transition easier for them versus going
Hmm.
into a locker room and not knowing
And
anyone outside of being an opponent against them. It's a
it's
slight edge
it's
that doesn't hurt.
yeah, it's like they're putting together almost like a brotherhood instead of a team.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great way of putting it. But again, Braun, 35 years of age, still has I'm trying to think if he's a UFA after this season.
I
Yes,
think
he is.
so. Yeah,
Yeah, he has 3.8 mil on his cap hit right now, or 3 to 3.8, one of the two.
yeah,
Actually, I
but
could be wrong. Pardon me, I am wrong. My mistake. He has 1.8 million as his cap hit, and then
yeah.
he will be a UFA after the season's end. But
Mhm.
that was one of three moves the Rangers made at the deadline, of course. And the other one that stood out was Tyler Motte. That was an interesting one because Motte has been known for being this really gritty forward, of course, playing in the bottom six for Vancouver. The Canucks fans absolutely love the guy from everything that I've seen. He's been pretty solid for them, had around 15 points for them this season and has definitely been steady when they've dealt with their injuries or, anything that they've been dealing with COVID wise. But Mott now comes to the Rangers, and the Rangers only gave up what, a fifth round pick for him? Was that the case?
A fourth
Fourth.
round pick. Yeah.
Okay. See, this is why I got to ask
Again,
you to
and
confirm
I
these
think
things.
this was also a fourth round. There was also a pick in 2023. So again, you're giving up a pick that you can recoup in the offseason. This is the beauty of it. Look at last season, for instance, last offseason. You trade away Brett Howden for a fourth round pick. That's how you recoup assets in the offseason after you've traded them away for another player. I know it's more difficult with a first round pick, and it's also a little bit tricky with a second rounder. But once you get to the third round and beyond, those picks are easy to come by. So this, by the way, the Seattle Kraken have 25 draft picks in the next two drafts combined.
Have
25.
My goodness gracious.
The Montreal Canadiens only have 19.
Only 19.
Only 19. So, yeah, I mean, there are deals to be made in the offseason. I'm not worried about draft picks in 2023. Tyler Motte, good addition for the fourth line. Sort of a contingency plan, in my opinion, in case they don't hold on to Kevin Rooney. If Kevin Rooney wants too much money, or if he wants to go somewhere else, who knows? But it's nice to have options.
And Mott
And
he's an RFA after the season. He's only 27. He plays both wings.
no, if he's 27, he's UFA.
You sure?
Yes.
Okay, you're right. I'm wrong. I'm an idiot. My apologies.
You
It's
cannot be
because of how
RFA.
cap friendly is set up. I
Yeah.
go bottom to the bottom and it says RFA, but if you go up, it says UFA. So that's
So
why I
it
got thrown
lists
off.
all the contracts, and then it has the current contract at the top.
Yes, that's why I was getting thrown off. Thank you. Okay.
But yeah, I'm just gonna jump right in because I know you have a lot to say about Andrew Copp, so I want to get my thoughts in first.
Go ahead.
The trade of the day for the Rangers, Andrew Copp for a second round pick, a conditional first round pick, and Morgan Barron. Now, I'll start off with Morgan Barron because I know Ranger fans were not super pleased with Barron being part of the trade, but let's be honest, Morgan Barron is a really fun prospect to follow. Sixth round pick. The fact that he got an entry level contract is already an achievement for a sixth round pick. But at best, he's a third line center. You gave up a potential third line center and some picks for a guy who is going to be at least a third line center for you, maybe more.
Yes.
And what I mean by maybe more is that Cobb is a potential cheaper alternative if they cannot reach an agreement with Ryan Strome.
Bingo.
But Cobb, again, connections with Jacob Trouba, connections with Tyler Mott, played for University of Michigan, same university Jed Ortmeyer went to, who's part of our who's a director of player development for the Rangers. So there are, again, there are links there. But I think Cobb, this deal was a good deal for the Rangers. And the conditional first, here's why I don't have a problem with it. Because I've been very adamant that I don't want to give up first round picks. I don't want to give up guaranteed first round picks. The condition here is it becomes a first round pick if the Rangers reach the Eastern Conference Final and Cobb plays at least 50% of the games in the postseason. Now, if we make it to the Eastern Conference Final, that means it's at best a 29th overall pick. That's basically a second rounder.
Exactly.
What I didn't want to happen was we give up a first round pick and then it's a first round exit for us, and we give up like a 16th or 17th overall pick, because the difference between 17th and 29th is only 12 spots, but in the NHL draft, that's huge. Because it falls off quick when you get to the second half of the first round. So I love this. If the Rangers give up their first round pick, it means they got to the third round of the playoffs, which is amazing experience for this young, inexperienced team when it comes to playoff hockey. And if Andrew Copp is the reason we got there, I'm more than willing to part with a first round pick this year.
It was perfect, the fact that it had that type of condition, as you were saying.
Yes.
And it reminded me a little bit of the conditions on Matt Zuccarello's trade when we dealt him to Dallas. Of course, he got hurt in that first game, but the
Yeah.
conditions were that could lead up to one of those picks to a first rounder if they either, I think, went to the Stanley Cup or just something deep in playoffs like that similarity.
It was a second round pick that would turn into a first round pick if they
Yeah.
made it to the conference finals and Zuccarello played at least 50% of the games. And then we got a third round pick that would turn into a first if they signed him to an extension.
And neither of
Now,
those things happened.
that second condition is no longer allowed under the current CBA. They
Yeah.
made some alterations. Draft pick conditions cannot be tied to a player signing an extension, because I think it's very close to tampering at that point. But performance-based conditional picks are still very much a thing, which is what we did here with Andrew Copp. And Copp is a guy that I'm pretty sure you have the numbers on your screen. What does he have? 35 points?
Yeah, Copp so far this season, 35 points in 56 games, 13 goals, 22 assists prior to his first game with the Rangers. And
Yeah.
last season, again, this is where he stood out, and this is where my eyes started open with him. 2019, 2020 is where I started paying a little bit more attention to him with Winnipeg, but an increased role last year in the short and pandemic season, 55 games, 39 points, 15 goals, 24 assists. Now, Copp is so damn interesting. I love this pickup. Again, I cannot stop raving about this. And it's nice that he obviously had a good debut for the Rangers in the game against the Devils, one of the few bright spots in the game. But for the most
Two
part,
assists.
Copp,
2 assists in his first game as a Ranger.
exactly. And we'll get into that shortly. But Copp, 27 years of age, someone who is in fact, let's see, he is a UFA after this season. But I would fully imagine that the Rangers plan to bring him back, especially for what they gave up, even though it wasn't necessarily first round picks per se. Still a good amount. I expect Copp and the Rangers to reach an agreement. I do think that to a certain extent, him having that familiarity with Trouba and others is only going to increase the likelihood of him staying, even if it's a bridge deal or whatever they reach an agreement on. But Copp, again, someone that felt that he was destined to leave Winnipeg with the direction, the ups and downs they've had this season, now willing to pay him. And I just love this move for the Rangers. You get someone that can play at the center position, plays both the wings, but he prefers center. He made that public. This season, he was going into that game. He was around 53, 54% on faceoffs. Throughout his career, he's been above 50% on faceoffs. That's something the Rangers
52.
desperately need because of the fact that they can't win faceoffs for the most part. Copp, what is he known for, at least from this season, especially from advanced numbers I've seen, is that he has been a special teams, not a merchant, but a guy that definitely thrives on special teams power play and can help you out PK. Defensively, there has been a slight decline the past couple years, but isn't because of necessarily the fact that he can't play, but rather how his utilization has been in an increased offensive role for Winnipeg these past 2 years. So he has that ability to really be a Swiss Army knife. You can play him all over the line and can give you plenty of defensive upside. Again, was very strong with his defensive numbers up until these past 2 years, but you see the difference is that he took away some of that defensive game because he knew that the offense was more important and really take his game to another level, which of course has made him into the player that he is right now. But Copp, I just love this pickup for the Rangers, to put it lightly. I really do.
Don't forget about the Drury connection.
Yeah, exactly. Stephen, lead the way on the Drury connection.
Because Andrew Copp played for Team USA at the 2017 World Championships, where Chris Drury was the assistant general manager for Team USA.
Yeah, so, it's little things like that definitely can help go a long way when it comes to player evaluation. Yeah. I mean, naturally, if Drury has been able to spend the time prior, especially years ago, where, saw Copp where he was then to where he is now, I mean, there's been plenty of progression. But again, to kind of wrap things up on the Rangers and their acquisitions, getting into this unfortunately horrendous Devils game, was that the Rangers did exactly what's, at least for myself and Steven, what we wanted them to do. look, Cabo Kako, Kevin Rooney, they should hopefully be back sometime in early April. That's what they're shooting for right now. And that's going to make this lineup all that more deeper. But for a Rangers team that's basically been playing with the AHL caliber bottom six for a good portion of the season, now they add this critical depth where you can have Copp as your third line center, can play right, can play left, however you want to utilize him. Vetrano gives you that top 9 depth as well with plenty of speed on the wing. And then you, of course, get Tyler Motte, who I think is really going to be a fan favorite sooner than later, given his ability and just not the fact that he's just a gritty fourth line guy, but he really can do a lot of different things for you and isn't afraid to get in those corners. So the Rangers are really getting more balance here. Justin Braun, of course, gives them more defensive depth. I don't love Justin Braun, but I do think he has a little bit of an edge on Patrick Nemeth. Either way, I would still like to see Braden Schneider get some playing time. We'll see exactly how much or how little he will for the remainder of the season. But all in all, I think this is a perfect deadline for the Rangers.
And Tyler Motte's acquisition is also, I guess that's a good reason Nils Lundkvist didn't go with number 64.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah,
because he would have had to give it up anyway. The one trade we didn't mention yet because it's basically a minor league trade, but I do want to touch on it quickly. We made a trade with the San Jose Sharks. Anthony Bitetto, who's UFA this upcoming summer, we traded him to the San Jose Sharks for Nick Merkley. Now, Merkley is an interesting case. He was a first-round pick. Was it back in 2015 or 2016? Really talented player, just didn't really have the career progression that you would have wanted from a late first-round pick. I think 30th overall. But the talent is there. And again, we talk about familiarity in hockey. One of the Rangers scouts, Kim Gellert, was the development coach in Kelowna for the Kelowna Rockets when Merkley played there in his draft year. So I'd have to think that kind of familiarity also plays a part. As a development coach, working with a player for a full year, you get a much better feel for someone's personality, someone's challenges, someone's willingness to compete, and maybe an explanation to why those struggles were there once he got to the pros. More so than you would do as a scout who just watches a couple of games and does a combine interview with a kid. Now, I didn't follow the combine as closely as I do now, so I'm not sure if Nick Merkley was interviewed by the Rangers back then. But I do know from conversations I've had with people in the Rangers organization and in other organizations and at the draft in Vancouver that a lot of teams interview players, and even if they don't get them at the draft, they still keep those notes on record. And then years down the line, if a player becomes available, you already have that information, on your desk that you might need to make a quick decision. I think this was a no-brainer trade. Even if Nick Merkley doesn't turn into anything, you gave up Anthony Bitetto, who was going to be a free agent at the end of the season anyway.
Exactly. You got something for nothing.
Yeah. And then the final thing I want to touch on before we quickly review the Devils game is the undrafted free agent signing we made last week.
Yeah, go ahead. I completely forgot about that, so I'm glad you brought it up.
Brandon Scanlon plays for the University of Omaha, Nebraska in the NCAA. As I said, undrafted defenseman, left-handed, big guy, plays with a little bit of an edge, so Ranger fans will love that. But he was a well sought-after player. He spoke to a lot of NHL teams. He was given a 2-year ELC by the Rangers, and the contract kicks in. They do a similar thing to what they did with Zach Jones last year, even though Zach Jones was our draft pick. But to get it over the line and to beat out other teams, you allow the contract to kick in now. So he gets a signing bonus now, and then he gets another signing bonus in June. He's an RFA in 2023. And the fact that he was so sought after by many teams in the NHL leads me to believe that this player definitely has NHL upside. He'll start in Hartford, but yeah, Bitetto leaving perfectly ties in with that too, because you have to make room for a player like that anyway. But yeah, intriguing signing for sure. Not really a program that I'm familiar with in the NCAA, University of Nebraska, but Definitely an interesting signing. And I'd have to look it up, but I think he's only like the third or fourth University of Nebraska alum to ever play for the Rangers.
Really? I didn't know that. Yeah.
So yeah, no, undrafted free agent signings are low risk and potential high reward. Look at Neil Pionk. And Neil Pionk might not play for the Rangers anymore. We still got our value out of him. So yeah,
it's a good point. That's fair.
A lot to like here.
Okay, let's get into the final game out of the games. Game 61 to 64, and that was the Devils game, and we had everyone in the lineup. Gerard Gallant had Andrew Copp in there. He had Copp in. He had Tyler Motte and Justin Braun. Of course, Schneider was out defensively to have Braun on the right side of that third pair. We saw Tyler Motte, of course, in the bottom six, and Andrew Copp as well. And yeah, I just got to start off by saying that I really liked what I saw from Andrew Copp. From the Ranger acquisitions in themselves, I thought that they looked good. Didn't love what I saw necessarily from Justin Braun. And didn't love at all what I saw from that pairing as a whole. But before we get into the negatives in this game, it did start off positive, right? The Rangers got off to early goal scoring. Feels like every time that Zibanejad is playing the Devils, especially in Prudential Center, good things happen. He scored his 26th of the season, and it was assisted by Kreider, his 16th apple, and Lafreniere's 9th assist. That would give Laffy his fourth assist, and has many games for the Rangers with a little assist streak going. And Laffy's the reason why that goal entirely happened, with what he was doing in that offensive zone, and then Kreider to get a shot off, and then the rebound for Zibanejad. So I really liked what I saw from Lafreniere early in this one. I loved what I saw from the Rangers early in this one, but again, it was the fact that it stayed early and it was not consistent, to put it lightly. I think we've seen that trend for the Rangers over these past couple of weeks throughout the entire month of March, where they're just giving up a plethora of goals in a very short period of time, and they just can't seem to catch up. That from the games that you were at in Minnesota and St. Louis, respectively. But then the second goal of the game, still in the first period, was by Adam Fox, a nice goal, his 10th of the year, assisted by Zibanejad, his 39th apple, and Copp, his first point as a New York Ranger, his 23rd assist of the season.
But how did he get his point? Let's quickly dive into this one for
go ahead,
10 seconds. He wins the face-off in the offensive zone.
Yep.
That's what we wanted. That's exactly what we needed.
Yeah, and it's damn refreshing to have a player like Andrew Copp.
He was starting his shift,
but he can win faceoffs. It feels good. He was
starting his shift in Kreider's spot with Zibanejad and Lafreniere just to win the faceoff. And it turns into he wins the faceoff. It gets to Lafreniere, and then was it Lafreniere? No, sorry, Fox. Fox had the other assist, right?
Fox for the
Fox at the goal. Sorry. So
yeah.
The puck gets to Zibanejad and then to Fox, and Fox, great shot, right? Roofs it diagonally, perfect. But yeah, that was exactly what we wanted from Andrew Copp, and he delivered like 8 minutes into his Rangers career. So that was great to see.
And then that's all, folks.
That's what happened. The second period didn't happen.
No.
Okay.
The Rangers won 2-0. But the unfortunate reality is that the Rangers they collapsed so hard in that second period, which led to the demise of Igor Shesterkin getting pulled. And this one for Georgiev. It could have been even worse. There was a offside goal that was challenged by Gallant, was called back. Didn't change anything, however. I was thinking, okay, 4-2 at that point. Maybe the Rangers are going to get some momentum going because they got a call on their side. Nope. It was ridiculous.
Kreider missed on a breakaway.
Yeah, he did miss on a breakaway. And the Rangers I'm not even going to deep dive how they happened. I'm going to just tell you that we all know that they did happen. Rangers gave up 5 goals in the second period, starting off with Ryan Graves, the former New York Ranger.
Second time this season, they gave up 5 goals in a period. Do you remember the other game that happened?
You were at one of those games.
No, thank God.
You weren't?
No.
Okay.
No.
Where the Rangers gave up 5 in a period.
It was the home game against the Colorado Avalanche where Adam Huska was in.
Oh, yeah.
His first goal.
Yep. Yeah, that wasn't fun. No.
Nope.
But, yeah, this one wasn't fun either. Ryan Graves, 6th of the year. Shortly after that, PK Subban's 5th of the year. Dawson Mercer, who's having a great rookie year, his 16th of the year, assisted by Ryan Graves, no less. Tomas Tatar, his 12th of the year. And then Yegor Sharangovich got himself his 16th of the year. And man, oh man, 5-2 heading into the third period. And that's really all she wrote. The Rangers tried to crawl themselves back in. Ryan Strome got himself his 15th of the year, shortly into the third period, assisted by Panarin, his 57th apple, and Lindgren's 8th apple of the year. Jack Hughes, however, again, just piss poor defense, not just in the second, but in the third. I mean, Hughes was just weaving through the Rangers D like it didn't even matter, especially on that power play goal. His 20th of the year, assisted by Heischer. And then Hughes again, his 21st. So Jack Hughes has had some damn good games against the Rangers, unfortunately. Yeah. His 21st, assisted by Sharon Govich.
And that was 2 goals in 70 seconds, too.
And there was just a complete lack of effort in this one. I mean, defensively, it looked horrid. The Nemeth pairing, I was not a fan of at all. I did not like, of course, have some of the PK. The PK, especially in the Jack Hughes goal, was just ridiculous. I mean, it was not fun to watch at all. And then Chris Kreider scores a power play goal, a little stat hat, if you will, just make things nice for him and his goal scoring, doing what he normally does. 42nd of the year, assisted by Copp. Copp on the power play gets his first power play assist for the Rangers, 24th overall of the year, and Fox gets his 54th apple. But Rangers lose that one 7-4. And man, oh man, this was a game where I can't sit here and blame everything on Igor, because it was by all means, it was piss poor defensively. Same thing with Georgiev, just a complete lack of effort and a complete loss for the game after getting that early, 2-goal lead in the first period. It just a complete collapse.
Look, it was the third game in 2 weeks where Shesterkin gave up 4 goals or more.
And it pisses me off that we're saying that. A lot of that isn't his fault either. And of course, I think he'll be fine, Vezina. But I mean, the guy has been on a heart pace this year. And of course, this has to happen to him now.
So this is why I think he should still be the MVP candidate. He has a couple of bad games statistically, and his save percentage drops from 9.42 to 9.35. If Austin Matthews doesn't score a goal for 3 games, nobody talks about him no longer being an MVP candidate, because he can score a hat trick in the 4th game and everything will be fine. But goalie numbers, especially save percentage, they're so fragile. And it sucks, and I think he's down now to 9.35 or 9.36. But
he's at 9.36, and I think he's at 2.14 goals allowed.
Yeah. Look, this game was just a lack of effort. I kind of blame Gallant too, because the Rangers gave up 2 goals in a minute 18 seconds at in the second period. If I'm Gallant and you give up two quick goals there, that's where you call a timeout.
Yeah. I agree, especially when you collapse so quick like that.
And I praised him for what he did against Tampa. But at the same time, if I praise him for that, I have to criticize him for this.
And especially with how he utilized Lafreniere. Laffy was one of the best forwards for the Rangers in this one.
Yeah,
and then
I'll get into that. I'll defend Gallant a little bit on that in a second. But they scored 2 goals in a minute 18. And then a couple of minutes later, they scored 2 goals in 45 seconds. And then in the third period, they scored 2 goals in a minute 10 seconds. Like 6 of their 7 goals came in batches that were very quick, one after another. And that's the thing that frustrates me the most, because what you want to see your team do is when they concede a goal is to regroup. Don't let it happen again. And this game, it just didn't gel. But look, the third period, Lafreniere was benched. Copp was put up on the top line with Kreider and Zibanejad. And as much as I hate it, I kind of have to give it to Gallant. If you want to experiment with your new players, you might as well do it in a game that's already over. You go into the third period down 5-2 after giving up five straight goals. Yeah. As much as we don't want players or coaches to give up, Gallant just threw the towel in the ring and decided to experiment a little bit with players here or there. I'd rather have him do it in this game than on Friday when we play the Penguins, because that game is crucial for our playoff seeding and home ice advantage. So,
Steven, if there is any positive to take away from this blowout, and I mean blowout, with the New Jersey Devils, it's that the exact same shit happened with the Penguins, and then look at how they performed against the Rangers that next game not all that long ago.
True. That's
true.
Look,
this is the vibe that I'm getting.
Yeah.
Rangers didn't get smacked around by the Devils. Now we're going to go play Pittsburgh at home, play a good, tight game. This was a wake-up call.
There are some bright spots in this game despite the 7-4 loss. Lafreniere, a 4-game assist streak. Andrew Copp getting 2 points in his first game as a Ranger, which I think, but I'd have to check, I think is the best Rangers debut by a trade deadline acquisition since Derek Brassard in 2013, who had a goal and 3 assists against the Penguins.
Yeah. And it's funny. It's funny how there's similarities with Brassard when you
Oh,
look at
yes.
Copp as a player too. There
Oh,
are
yes.
those similarities with that acquisition. So
I
it is
would not
interesting
be
how
I
they
would not
connect
be
like that.
shocked. I would not be shocked if Andrew Copp turns into a top 6 center in New York.
I won't be shocked either. And I just love it. I love the fact that it gives the Rangers versatility. Now, look, I know that you have been a heavy advocate for, Ryan Strome isn't going anywhere, right? We're gonna sign him to a new deal. He deserves it. But having said that, if the Rangers do find themselves not wanting to rekindle that relationship with Strome,
Mm,
they are in safer hands than they were a couple of days ago. And there's no denying
yeah.
that. So
No, true. And if they can convince Ryan Strome to sign a Ryan Nugent Hopkins or Joel Eriksson Ek type deal, where you sign him for 8 years at a lower cap hit, let's say 4.8 million for 8 years, and you sign Andrew Copp for 5 million, that's basically 9 million for your middle 6 centers. That's not much different than paying 7 million for your second line center and 2.5 million for your third line center,
yep.
which was going to be the scenario anyway if we signed Strome to an extension and held on to Hedel. So it gives Drury options, which is nice. The last thing I want to call out about this game is the Kreider goal at the end. He does it again. It's unbelievable. 42nd goal of the season. And the reason this was special to me is because, as you know, I've been tracking his progress throughout the season. Where does he rank after a certain number of games in goals scored in franchise history, in power play goals in franchise history? But I want to call out the fact that Chris Kreider now holds the record for most goals in a single Ranger season by one of our own draft picks, surpassing Steve Vickers, who held the record for 47 years with 41 goals. 1974-75, Steve Vickers had 41 goals in 80 games, and Chris Kreider scored his 42nd in his 64th game. So
Wow.
he's owned, and what really, I need to mention this because hopefully this is the last time I'm going to mention this guy's name on our podcast. We're 2 points away from retiring the talk about Tony Amonte. Chris Kreider is on 58 points. If he gets 2 more points, we no longer have to talk about how Tony Amonte is the last Rangers forward draft pick to get 60 points for us. And that was in 93. So please, Chris, 2 more points.
He's going to get there. I mean, look, I said that Chris was still on the season with 45 goals. He still needs at least 3 points for that to happen, right? So
another fun Kreider step before we wrap it up with, the questions and this and that. Chris Kreider is one of only 2 players in Rangers history to score at least 40 goals while having 20 or fewer assists in a single season. The other one was Mike
sounds like
Gardner.
something a goal scorer would do, right?
The other one was Mike Gardner in the early 90s, who had 40 plus goals, and I think he had like 19 or 20 assists. So that's I mean, it's not a meaningful stat, it's just a fun stat, but
that is a fun stat. And I think that's a perfect segue now for the people that are watching the live stream. As we just hit over the hour mark, we're going to spend, I'd say at least 5 minutes or so answering some questions for you guys, and then we'll look at the upcoming schedule to wrap things up. Not a crazy long extended Q&A segment today, so I do apologize to people in the live stream, but it just for the sake of obviously time, making it more appealing to all the viewers out there, however you're getting your podcast. Let's see. Okay, now let's get into it, guys. Now, before I answer some questions, I just want to say that the Rangers, the spot they're in now, and I know I'm going to keep raving about Andrew Copp, but he's just someone that I feel like that this is kind of a dream come true in a lot of ways for Gerard Gallant, because he even said it himself. He would have been disappointed if the Rangers did not make any acquisitions by the deadline. And, he said it's always a tough discussion for players they know are going to be either getting, off the team or, limited time because of guys coming in. But he knew things had to be done, and we all knew that too. But for Copp to come in, I mean, the Rangers, they didn't land Artturi Lehkonen. He went to the Avalanche. That was a big deal. And Lehkonen, I actually didn't even realize how great he is with his advanced numbers. He's actually a tremendous forward. And when you look at the
Mhm.
advanced numbers outside of just the normal base statistics,
And
that was
again,
a great pickup. And then we saw Ricardo Raquel go to the Pittsburgh Penguins because, of course, they have to land themselves
mhm.
another winner at the deadline, per usual, to help in that top 6, top 9. But for them to land Copp, given his versatility, this can go down as one of the better acquisitions the Rangers have had in recent years, in season at least. So I can't emphasize how much I am happy and excited about what the Rangers have done here. And a huge tip of the cap again to Chris Drury for doing something that really helped define who he is so far as a GM, really leading the way for the Rangers from the offseason and the horrendous Buchnevich trade to where they have come now.
Mm.
It is telling you that clearly that Drury's operating under the system, under the belief that is not the stereotypical say their way, which is
Yeah.
what a lot of us fans were originally concerned with,
Well,
given
we
his
were
aggressiveness this offseason.
because Chris Drury didn't give us any indication that he wouldn't.
Yeah, that's fair. Yep.
And he made all these deals without giving up Nils Lundqvist, Zach Jones, Braden Schneider, Brendan Othman, Brett Berard, Will Cooley, even Ryder Korczak you can throw in there. The only player that he gave up that fans might be a little bit upset about is Morgan Barron.
Yep.
And to be perfectly honest, Morgan Barron feels a little bit like Lias Andersson, because Lias Andersson couldn't work his way up the lineup while outplaying Brett Howden.
Bingo. It's not just because of who Barron is as a player and his ceiling, but his situation. We all knew that Barron wasn't going to be gaining any significant time anytime soon with this current team.
Barron was stuck behind Greg McKegg. We all saw it. None of us understood it, but it is what it is.
Yep. Okay, let's get into a couple questions, shall we? Let's see. Mazzaro, thank you so much for the comment. What do the lines look like when Kakko and Rooney come back? Now, that's a great question, because I think that's a perfect pivot, what I want to talk to you about with how the lineup is constructed, because in practice today, at least offensively, Vince Mercogliano, the main guy for the Rangers that you guys know for the most part, the lines today, controversial. Again, we're going to see them mix around a lot, but as of today, and this goes in hand with Kakko and Rooney, so stay tuned for that. Kreider, Zibanejad, Vetrano. First line. Second line, Panarin, Strome, Copp. Second line. Third line, Lafreniere, Hedel, Gaudreau. Third line. Fourth line, Motte, Brodzinski, Hunt. Not even Revo in there. Okay, so that's what it looked. Then after that, Vince said the following. Not sure if this means much, but for gassers, of course, doing the gassers on the ice are the end of practice. Laff skated with Zibanejad and Kreider. Copp skated with Panarin and Strome. And Vetrano skated with Hedel and Gaudreau. Not going out on a limb, saying nothing is set in stone, expect Gallant to experiment for a few games. And then furthermore, he went on to say this recently. I'll put out some quotes later, but Gallant said to expect to see them try a few different line combos in the coming games. He also said he's anticipating Kakko and Rooney's returning, and has that in the back of his mind as he considers where they'll fit. So to kind of go to answer your question a little bit, and bless you, Steven. I don't know if you did sneeze. Someone said in the chat you did, so I'm assuming you did. But
yeah, sorry.
Kakko and Rooney, they're expected to hopefully be back in early April. So when you look at the construction right now, now's the time to figure out your lines. As much as I don't want Laffy on that third line, if the reason is solely because of the fact that you're trying to see what can work right now with Vetrano and Copp, I get it. Like, if you're going to mix it around right now with your new acquisitions, by all means, this is still the time to do it. You want to do it fairly quick to make sure that you have something balanced down the stretch of the season for, the last 10 plus games. But once Kakko and Rooney's back, the Rangers can go a lot of different avenues. Now, in my humble opinion, I think that it all will be indicative on Kakko and how really up to game speed he is when he returns. Because we're talking about a guy that's coming off of quite literally breaking his wrist to come back to the Rangers down the stretch heading into playoffs. How much are we going to get from him? How game ready, how game shape is he going to be? We simply don't know that right now. There's always that raw adjustment, getting the cobwebs off, if you will, before you're really in a flow of things. So Kakko, you'd imagine, would be in that top 6, but we don't know for certain. So I'm going to just say right now what I think is a potential fit. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised. First line, Kreider, Zibanejad, Lafreniere. Second line, Panarin, Strome, Kakko, because we know that Kakko played a lot on the second line this season. Third line, this is where you have plenty of opportunity. I would imagine Copp at the center position, because Copp is the best center option there. Hedel on the left, and potentially Vetrano on the right, which would automatically drop Gaudreau to the fourth line, given your depth. And then you have Gaudreau on one of the wings, and then Rooney would be in there. And then I would imagine that they would alternate between having Revo and Motte. I mean, Revo would probably be the odd man out for a little bit, actually, depending on how Motte
I'd
performs.
say of those 4 options for your fourth line, the only one who's guaranteed to play is Barclay Goodrow.
Yeah. Yep.
But
because you need him. Even if Gaudreau isn't giving you too much offensive production, he's so vital, especially for the Rangers on the PK. I mean, he's done a lot. He has played, in my mind, up to his contract with how the Rangers have utilized him this season. So there's no denying that.
It's nice that and we sometimes joke about general managers taking away the coach's favorite toys, which I mean Ellen Vigneault and Tanner Glass and David Quinn and Brett Howden and Gerard Gallant and Greg McKegg. Yeah, Drury didn't take Greg McKegg away from him. He just gave him better options. And the same thing goes for Dryden Hunt. You know, Dryden Hunt has had 2 really good stretches, ironically, both times when I was in the US. But Dryden Hunt is just a fourth-line player at best in the NHL. On a contender, he should not be a top 9 player. And the fact that we added Vetrano and Copp, you know, and Kakko's coming back, and Lafreniere is already in the top 6. I don't see Dryden Hunt having a spot on this team if everyone's healthy.
I agree. Why would you give him a spot? There isn't one.
No.
There just
the more interesting debate for me is which one of the 3 defensemen sits out on the third pairing.
Unfortunately, I think it's going to be Schneider more often than not. But I will say is that if this pairing between Braun and Nemeth continues down the hole that we saw start against the Devils, I mean, Gallant is self-aware enough to know when he needs to mix things up and feels Schneider hasn't been great in his previous games. I think that's a fair.
Those 2 games on the weekend showed his weakness, and it's not that he's not good enough. It's just that he needs time to get better. Yep. I mean, the kid just turned 20.
And he exceeded expectations when he was the first out of the young group of defensemen this season to really stand out to Gallant from the get-go. Jones didn't do it to the same extent. Niels obviously didn't either. And I know that Gallant obviously likes the size aspect that Schneider brings too. That's inevitable.
Yeah. But I think it's going to be Nemeth Braun going into the playoffs, unless one of them really is atrocious and does something that costs us games. I don't see Braden Schneider getting playing time in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I don't either unless we're proven otherwise prior. You know, if that third pair completely collapses,
we're only one injury away from all this conversation being completely meaningless. So
true, very fair. Not that I wish it on anyone. We just know that that's how things stand right now. Gonna answer a couple more here.
Sure.
Let's see. Do you guys think we keep Strome in the offseason? Now, Steven has been under the belief that he feels that the Rangers need to. That makes perfect sense. I think that there's still a very good Strome. I think there's a very good possibility Strome comes back. I will emphasize, however, that Drury did not elaborate on Strome's situation from his presser after the Rangers made their trade deadline acquisition. So there isn't any public comment on Strome's future for the Rangers,
which probably means negotiations are currently underway.
Yeah, that very well could be the case for sure. So I really don't know what Strome's future holds for the Rangers, because I really don't know how this offseason is going to play out, because I do think it's going to go directly in hand with how little or how far the Rangers go playoff wise. You know, that's definitely going to be a factor into Drury's player evaluation.
The way Andrew Copp plays goes a long way as well. And like I said, if Ryan Strome is willing to sign an Eriksson Ek or Nugent Hopkins type deal, then you can make that work. You know, you're going to struggle a little bit the first year because we still have $3.4 million in cap penalties this upcoming season. But if you can get Copp and Strome under contract for a combined $9 million or less, I think it's going to happen. You know, Hedel and Nemeth are easy casualties with the cap hit they have and with the replacements we have. Copp's going to replace Hedel in that case, and Jones is going to come up to replace Nemeth. There are moves that Drury can make to make it fit under the cap. But you also have to think about Panarin, and as much as we don't really talk about it, the opinion of your star player matters. And Panarin loves playing with Strome. Panarin has played his best hockey with Ryan Strome. Panarin has had his best production ever in his career playing with Ryan Strome. And I know a bunch of that came on the power play, but still, I think Panarin's opinion goes a long way towards trying to get Ryan Strome under contract. The fact that they did not trade him at the deadline is an indication that they at least want to try and keep him.
Yeah, that's fair. And, I think it's one of those things when you look at Strome, he's done a very good job, exceeded expectations for the most part for the Rangers since they've acquired him, especially in the Ryan Springer deal. We're not going to go down that whole anymore. We know exactly how much of a win that was for our Rangers, but he's just someone where he has his stretches. We've seen them as of late too, between the narrative on missing the open nets and always being a high penalty guy. But then we've also seen those consistent streaks as well of Strome where either he's gained some good goal scoring or the playmaking's just there. For the most part, he's always felt like a very good complement to Panarin. Panarin thrives off of Strome. Strome thrives off of Panarin. Even if they're not to the same degree, there is still a degree there. And that is, of course, important in the Rangers' viewpoint on how they look at Strome as a future New York Ranger or not. So we're going to see what the offseason brings.
There is a reason why the Pittsburgh Penguins held on to Chris Kunitz for so long.
Yep, exactly. Let me put it this way: it's not for Chris Kunitz's complete talents, but rather how Chris Kunitz, not to get on a tangent, is the perfect example of a man at the right place at the right time. He is that perfect glue guy. There's no one that really you could argue has done it better for him. Winning the amount of champion, he won 6 Stanley Cups, 5 to 6, because he won with Anaheim. He won, of course, with the Penguins all their times, and then he won with Tampa. Like he has a plethora.
So he has 5.
At least 5. 5 or 6.
Did he win both?
I don't know. He didn't win. He won 1 with Tampa. I know that, right?
I'm going to quickly look it up now because now I'm curious.
I know he was on the Blackhawks too. Did he win with the Blackhawks? No.
I forgot that he won one with Anaheim, if that's true.
Yeah, everyone forgets about the Anaheim one. But yeah, he's been that glue guy.
He's won 4.
Oh, okay. I'm a dick then. I apologize.
So he won 1 with the Anaheim Ducks. And then he won 3 with the Penguins, and then he was with the Tampa Bay Lightning in 2017-18. So before they won their 2 cups.
Okay.
He won 4 Stanley Cups. He's probably the most how do I say this? One of the least impressive players to win 4 Stanley Cups in the last 4 decades.
And who's going to quickly make his way up there if he ends up winning again
Patrick
this year.
Maroon.
Exactly. The time and the place. It's just, yep. Can set it better. All right, we're going to answer another 2 questions here. Then we're going to wrap things. Let's see. Since we kept all the blue chip prospects, do I see Drury going all in for Kane or Scheifele? No, I don't. Kane never. No, the Kane talk needs to stop, in my opinion. And Scheifele, I don't see it happening either right now. At least
I'm gonna say this real quick. The Rangers do not have the cap space for Patrick Kane. It's that simple. Even if the Blackhawks retain 50%, it's still $5.25 million. The Rangers go into the offseason as it stands with $10.7 million in cap space with 6 spots to fill. If they acquire Kane, and that's like Sammy Blake, Kaapo Kakko, do you want to keep Copp or Strome? If you do add Patrick Kane, you are left with $5.5 million for 5 players. So you're basically looking at entry-level contracts at that point because the team wants at least $1 million in cap space to go into the season for cap flexibility. So you have $4.5 million to sign 5 players. That's 5 entry-level contracts. That means no Kakko, no Blais, no Strome, no Cobb, no Tyler Motte, no Kevin Rooney, and probably Tyler Wall is your backup. Scheifele, if they wanted Scheifele, they would have targeted him. They went for Andrew Copp instead.
Okay. Last but not least, here from KJ says, how much of a run do you think this team is capable of? You and I have talked kind of extensively about this already, but the Rangers are a team where I don't know if this is necessarily what they're capable of, but rather what we hope for is that they just make it past the first round. I think that's really the important part.
Yeah.
Obviously, making playoffs is important because as of right now, the Rangers aren't terribly far away from already dropping to the wild card. They're only, I believe the Capitals are only 5 points behind the Rangers right now. So it's still a tight race just for playoffs as it is, looking at the wild card and the standings. But assuming the Rangers make playoffs, I think they're capable of one, winning the first round, as tough as that will be if it's going to match up against the Penguins. But two, they will go as far as Igor Shesterkin takes them. The same way we would say every year with the Rangers during Henrik Lundqvist's time. Same exact thing holds true. As unfortunate as that is to say, because that should not be the case when you're talking about a team and an overall team effort. But at the end of the day, Igor has been and will continue to be that X factor for the Rangers. As long as they don't have complete defensive collapses like we've been seeing throughout this past month and various times, especially recently in that Devils game, they will go as far as Igor takes them. So it would not be outlandish to suggest that the Rangers may go on a deeper run than what us fans initially expected this year, nor would it be outlandish to see the Rangers still get kind of quickly kicked out because they have the lack of experience still. It's their first year under Gallant. How is he going to look in playoffs as well? Versus especially if they do match up with the Penguins, Pens know what to do. They've been there. They've done that. This is a very different young Rangers team that is just starting to get their feet wet when it comes to playoff hockey.
And also, if you look at the Penguins, that Penguins team, let me quickly pull it up. The Penguins team, when it comes to experience, they have, hold on, there we go. They have Brian Boyle, who had deep runs with both the Rangers and the Lightning. Jeff Carter, who won 2 cups with the Kings. Malkin, Crosby, and Letang, who of course won 3 cups with the Penguins. And then you have, in their early 30s, Brian Dumoulin and Chet Ruedel, who aren't really star players, but still, they bring that experience. Ricard Raquel, age 28. Jake Gensel has been with the team for what it feels like a decade. This is a team that has a lot of playoff experience, unlike the Rangers, who are coming out of a rebuild. So, look, my wish has always been very conservative. I want the Rangers to play 7 playoff games. That's it. Because that either means they make it to game 7 in the first round, which is great experience, or they win a round and get to the second round. Either way, it's great experience for a young team. And aside from Barclay Goodrow and Sammy Blais, most of the players on this team have not played playoff hockey in the last 5 years. And Justin Braun, of course. But,
yep.
The players in key positions, aside from Barclay Goodrow, who played in the top 6 at some stages during the season, this team doesn't have recent playoff experience. Artemi Panarin in 2019. But other than that, for Kreider, it's been 5 years. For Zibanejad, it's been 5 years. Shesterkin, Fox, and Lindgren have never made it to the 16-team format of the playoffs. Let's put it that way. Miller's in his second season. Lafreniere's in his second season. Kakko's in his third season. Ryan Strome, his last playoff experience was probably with the Oilers. Philip Hedl. Was Philip Hedl on the Rangers? No, Philip Hedl was drafted by the Rangers after our last playoff run in 2017.
Correct.
So again, Philip Hedl, and I mentioned this in the previous episode, Philip Hedl is the 3rd longest tenured Ranger on this team.
I know.
And he never played a playoff game in a 16-team format for the Rangers.
Yep.
That goes to show you how inexperienced this team is. Adding Braun, I like it. Nemeth brings some playoff experience, but this team needs to get their feet wet first. If the Rangers can make it to the second round, that's gravy. I expected them to make the playoffs this season because it's natural progression. If they make it to the second round, that's a bonus. If they make it to the third round and they give up that first round pick, I'm dancing in the streets because that's even better experience. If you make it to the final 4 with a team that has close to zero experience in the playoffs over the last 5 years, I'll take it. You know, I've always said the Rangers aren't going to be contenders until 2024. It's a natural progression. It takes 5 years from a top pick to being a contender. The Blackhawks needed 6 years. The Penguins needed 7 years. The Bruins and the Kings, the Bruins had a retool in 2006, and the Kings won a cup 5 years after their first top 5 pick. The first top 5 pick for the Rangers was Kakko in 2019. So 2024 is already a very optimistic expectation for me.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, we've been saying this endlessly that, the Rangers, they'll be in a better spot, obviously, as they continue to progress their young stars and make them into stars, I should say. And that, I think, is when the Rangers will properly flourish when it comes to their playoff runs.
And yeah, Shesterkin can carry them. But when we've seen teams being carried to a Stanley Cup by a goalie, they were carried by a goalie who was still behind a really solid defense.
Yep.
And with the Rangers, unfortunately, that's just not the case yet. Yeah, we have a Norris Trophy winner, but what else do we have defensively? It's lacking a little bit. So yeah, hopefully Shesterkin can carry us to the second round. I would be happy with that.
I would be happy with that too. And again, we're going to see what happens, but I do expect hopefully some progression from the Rangers come playoff time this year, assuming that they, of course, crack it, which I'm not going to say is inevitable. It feels close to. But all right, let's get into now the games upcoming for the Rangers before we get out of here and look at, this being episode 51 to be exact. But upcoming schedule for the Rangers, they have 4 games in place, and it starts with the Pittsburgh Penguins tomorrow, the 25th at home, and then the Rangers at home on the 27th. That being Sunday, we'll have a 5 o'clock game against the Buffalo Sabres. We'll see how they do there. And then the 29th and 30th, back-to-back games again. Another week where the Rangers have back-to-back here. And this time at Pittsburgh on the 29th, and then on the 30th at Detroit. Next time that Steven and I will record will be at the earliest, Thursday, the 31st, I would say, as of now. So we're looking at 4 games for the Rangers until we talk again. And because of the fact that I believe you won, I guess you can go first then with your prediction.
Yeah, 2 crucial games in there against the Penguins, home and away.
Yes.
That definitely stands out. Of course, home against the Sabres. I want to say that should be an easy win, but I was at the Sabres game at Madison Square Garden in November, and it wasn't that easy. And the Red Wings, man.
They're a pesky team.
Moritz Seider, Lucas Raymond, Dylan Larkin. Man, they're fun to watch.
They are.
I think we're going to win at least one of the games against the Penguins. We're going to beat the Sabres. I'm going to go 2-1-1.
Okay, I'm going to go 3-1. So I think that's fair.
Yeah. And goals? I'll go first since I won last week. I'm going to go with 12.
Of course you are. I'm going to go with... I guess I'll take the under because that's what you did last time. I'll take 11.
Cool. All right. Can you write it down for today?
Yeah, I'll write it down. Hold on.
All
right. Let's see. You picked 2-1-1. I picked 3-1-0, and then 12 goals to 11 goals.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Now, before we get out of here, let's take a look at, obviously, number 51 for the Rangers and their history. I got to be honest. There's no one that's cracking the dome.
There's 3.
There's 3. Is any of them over the past decade?
Actually, 2 over the past decade. 1 actually last season.
Oh, now I'm going to feel like an idiot because I don't remember the one from the last season. Oh, now I do. Tarmo Ronanen. All right.
Tarmo Ronanen. There you go.
Yeah,
that's the easy one. That's the
easy one. Rob O'Gara was like 46 or something.
A defenseman and a center.
Still over the past decade.
The center was 2017-18. The defenseman was from 2004 to 2008.
I won't know that defenseman. No, it isn't Michael.
Nope. It's not a Michael.
Okay.
It's a European defenseman.
Oh, I'm losing it. But I do know that I'm cheating. I'm looking in the live stream chat. But yeah, Desharnais. Yeah. I remember Desharnais. Yeah. I
And
remember
then
him.
the defenseman was Fedor Tutin.
Oh, okay. The Blue Jackets, man. Okay.
There you
Gotcha.
go. Yeah, he
There
did
you
play
go.
for the Rangers before that.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think of Blue Jackets when I think of him, though, personally, because
Yeah.
that's what I grew
No,
up to.
true. It's like when people think of Anthony Duclair, they don't necessarily, like, non-Ranger fans don't necessarily think of Anthony Duclair as a New York Ranger, of course.
Exactly. Yep.
They think of him
Okay.
as an Arizona Coyote, an Ottawa Senator, and now Florida Panther.
Yep.
Although he also played for the Columbus Blue Jackets, like Fedor Tutin
He
did.
did play for CB. He played for a bunch of teams.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyway,
Well,
do you have any more points before
final
we wrap
words?
it up, then?
I mean, I'm good. I'm just tough schedule for the Rangers coming up. I need them.
Mhm.
I need them to step up in these Penguins games. Those matter most. They're
I
really
just want
important.
2 points from Chris Kreider.
You just want 2 points from Chris Kreider. Me,
I don't want
I
to talk
want
about Tony Amonte anymore, man.
I want to see Frank Vetrano step up, because if someone's going to step up, I think it's going to be Frank, because he has great numbers in his career against the Penguins.
And one thing I'll say about Vetrano, and yes, you stole that from me
Yes, I did.
because I shared it with you. Frank Vetrano in 13 career games against the Penguins has 10 points.
Yep. My brother put me onto that right away when we acquired him. I was like, oh, get out. Okay, that makes sense. Penguin killer. Love that.
But yeah, Vetrano, you know who Vetrano reminds me of? A player that I also wanted at the deadline, even though he was never really available. Adrian Kempe of the LA Kings.
Oh yeah, I know. You've been preaching Kempe all year long.
Because he does exactly what this team needs. He enters the zone, he's fast, he's a good puck carrier. Vetrano's the same way. He's just a less obvious version of Adrian Kempe, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, for sure. But okay.
So what are the odds of Jacob Trouba becoming captain now that all his friends are on the team?
Nope. Changes nothing. Changes nothing. That should not be a reason why he becomes captain.
Can you imagine Trouba captain and then Copp, Vetrano, and Motte alternates?
I'm not intrigued by that. I got to be honest with you. I like their connection, but I don't like it that much to the point of.
I'd rather have 6 alternates than go with that, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. But
by the way, one last thing: if we win the cup, do the 6 alternate captains carry the cup around like a casket, like in the meme that's been going around for the last?
They might have to, because that's the only way to properly carry it by that point. They're gonna have to do it over their heads. That's hopefully we can joke about that, soon.
That would be
I'm not
awesome.
gonna get my hopes up.
That would be amazing. Yeah. Anyway,
that would. All right. Well, again, Rangers review episode 51. I was saying 30 because we're just past an hour and a half into this one. So if you guys were watching wherever you get your podcast, especially on YouTube, make sure to smash that like and subscribe button. It means a lot. And of course, if you're listening wherever you get your podcast, leave a nice review. If you somehow, some way enjoyed this Rangers review, myself, Tyler, along with Steven, Statboy Steven, check us out on Twitter as well. Again, appreciate everyone's support. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. And Steven has another thing that he has to say before we get out of here, like he usually does. And that is.
I forget these things all the time. I forgot last week when we recorded. When I was in St. Louis and in Minnesota, I had people come up to me and tell me that they loved listening to our podcast. So I'm sorry, I don't remember names, but if you were one of those people, I just want to say thank you.
Shout out to everyone. Yeah, it's very.
Shout out
I
to
only
everyone.
won one game so far this year, and I had people come up to me when I was in DC talking about Rangers.
Shout out to everyone who saw me at a Rangers game and walked up to me and asked for a photo or just had a quick chat. Really appreciate it, and it's nice to know that people enjoy the podcast this much.
Yeah, it really is. It's always humbling. Again, we're always both grateful for being able to do what we do and kind of get the feedback that we do. So shout out to you guys in St. Louis and shout out to everyone across the globe that has been chiming in to Rangers Review. But that'll cap things off. Again, thank you guys all so much. We'll be back hopefully next week, next Thursday. We're going to put a soft date on that because, of course, we're always crazy with our schedules. But as of now, we'll be back around then after the next 4 games for the Rangers. But until then, thank you guys so much again. Have a great rest of your day, great rest of your week. And Steven, let's go Rangers.
Let's go Rangers.